Yes, this is Rhymes Reason. There we go. Yes. All right, today's guest is Chandran Nair. Ooh, this is exactly what I needed this morning. Music. You know, as I was saying in a post earlier, sometimes you just wish. Sometimes you just wish you could take coffee intravenously. you had, I know you've had days like that. I know you have. So don't try to act like I'm the only one that, feels that way. But we do have Chandran Nair, Singaporean poet and retired director and mediator of UNESCO in Paris. Nair started writing at an early age, and his first poems were published in his school magazine, the the Rafflesian or the Rafflesian. I don't know how to pronounce that. In 1963, that's something he and I have in common. You know that I my first poem was published when I was a high school student, and it was published without me knowing it was published. My English teacher thought the poem was so good that there's a book that comes out at the end. That there was a book that came out at the end of the school year in Chicago for Chicago Public Schools, and it highlighted some of the best writing in the school. And my poem was highlighted because Mrs. Cooney or Miss Cooney at the time, Miss Cooney entered my poem into that, and it was chosen out of thousands of selections. And so I will be eternally grateful to Miss Cooney. But yeah, so we have a great show coming. I'm going to talk to Chandran about, you know, the things that are going on in Yemen, the humanitarian crisis, it's happening all across the globe, most of which can be traced back to our involvement, the U.S., our involvement in these conflicts in Yemen, and these conflicts in Syria, and these conflicts in Libya, and all across the globe. Want to pick someone's brain, such as Chandran, who has had such a rich uh, life of public service. And I just wanted to, just would love, we're going to love talking to him about his insights about all this. And this is what we try to do on Rhymes Reasons. We try to bring you people, we try to bring you people who can best uh, give you the insights into what's going on in our world and in our society. We had Gilbert Mercier, on Monday. Now that something happened with the audio on that program, and we're going to try to get back to Gilbert, uh, the editor of News Junkie Post, at a later time this week. We want to redo that program because he said a lot of good stuff and a lot of things that I believe will be very essential and helpful to us as we try to navigate through this minefield called politics. And it's not just American politics. We have some interesting, elections coming up in France and Australia and some other places. So if you thought that what's going on here in America is unique, it is not. And if we open our eyes and ears a little bit, we can see and we can understand and we can best surmise what the tea leaves are saying, so to speak, across the globe. Um, so yeah, but I think one of my biggest problems right now is that if you criticize Obama, you're thought to be a a Trumpkin, and if you criticize Trump, you're considered to be an Obamian. Well, let me assure you, folks, I am neither. I am none of that. I hold no loyalty to political parties. You know why I hold no loyalty to political parties? Because political parties, by and large, do not hold any loyalty to us. So why would I be, walking around with pictures of politicians in my wallet like they're my, my dog or my, or my grandchild? Things like this. I mean, this is just ridiculous how we get sucked in to the cult of personality, how we get sucked in to, these popularity contests. I don't have time for any of that. I made a decision, people. I really did. I made a decision. I made a decision that I was going to be a citizen. And when you make the decision to be a citizen, you don't care about the optics or what people are saying. When you become a citizen, and especially a citizen who does this sort of work, then you have to, not get personally caught up in, the cult of personality. You cannot, you cannot, you cannot do it. You can ill afford to do that. So yeah. Now I'm looking at my YouTube live feed here, and it says that the stream is it's bad right now. I have absolutely no idea why that's the case. We'll figure that out. Hopefully you can hear me. Um, on YouTube Live and also on Blog Talk Radio. We're probably going to be making some changes sometime soon when it comes to the server that we're going to be using for our radio broadcast. Um, but for now, we're here on YouTube Live, and for now, we're using Blog Talk Radio. Um, so I'm guessing Chandran will be calling fairly soon. Now it's kind of funny. Guibert Mercier is a French citizen, and I'm going to be talking to Chandran Nair he lives in Paris. So we have this, this whole French thing going on. Vive la France! Vive la France! Well, today was also is going to be hashtag ha 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 Tuesday as well too. So I guess I'm combining the two right now, Um, and when you have someone who has done the work that former director Nair has done, or Nia has done across the globe, you make the time because Rhymes Regions usually airs on Wednesday evenings, but because um, they are, I think Paris is like 7 hours ahead of us. Yeah, I believe so. 7 hours ahead of us, we had to make the time earlier in the day, so we're not talking at like 3 o'clock in the morning, their time. So I hope that you all are not just surviving but thriving during this time. Yes, there are decisions that are being made that should give us pause. Yes, we see things that we don't agree with. Yes, but what have I been telling you all along? Policy is what's happening when you're paying too much attention to the politics. It is a shell game, ladies and gentlemen. It is a shell game. They want you to keep your eye, on the movement of the hands, and you forget where that little P is at, and you get distracted by these movements there and these sleight of hand sort of things, and lo and behold, you're looking under the wrong shell. Politically speaking, that's what we've been doing for quite some time. For quite some time. Now, I don't know where you stand politically. I mean, I really don't. All of you, I don't. I mean, some of you I do because I know you. But we have to get out of this mindset that criticism of policy and criticism of any administration's, decision making is something that's untoward. We can't treat it that way, people. We are citizens. And part of being a citizen is having the right to complain about decisions that are made. We'll get into that a little bit more later. Right now, we're going to talk to Chandran Nair, and I'm going to find out exactly how to pronounce his name because I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. Okay? Hello? 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 I think we lost him. I clicked on the button. Dang, we lost him. Did we drop off? Hello? Shadron? Hello? He's IMing me now. You can talk now, Shadron. You can talk. Hello? I'm here. Hello? I'm talking. I clicked on the, you're not on hold anymore, Shadron. You can talk. Hello? Okay, here's what we're going to get a hang up and call again. Okay, we will recall. Okay, so yeah, while we're waiting, and it won't be long, I'm guessing, realize that when you decide and you determine that you are a citizen, that means that you're going to be vigilant. That means you're going to keep your eyes open no matter who's in office. You can't trust politicians to just do what they're supposed to do out of the kindness of their hearts. It is about vested interest. It is about what do you, okay, so now he's on hold. I'm going to click on it. All right. Chandran, hello? 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 Okay, we're having some technical difficulty again. You know, I get a little paranoid. I have to admit, I do get a little bit paranoid when things like this happen, you know, because I mean, practically every single time I try to have these conversations, somehow, some way, this happens. Okay, this is what we are going to do then. All right. I got more than one trick up my sleeve. Got more than one trick up my sleeve.
camera. What?
Hello?
Hello. Hey. Hi, nice talking to you. We didn't get through on the phone.
Yeah, but this time I got you here.
Hello, Dr. House. You get
Well,
the two of us.
hello. How are you? You
How
caught
are
me.
you?
You caught me with my hair uncombed and everything.
What do you think? We were not expecting you to come on. Look at me and look at him.
Yes. Well, here we are. Here we are. So
Right.
I think
Are we broadcasting now?
Are we
we are
broadcasting now?
broadcasting now. Now, how do you pronounce your name?
I'm leaving. I'm not going to interrupt. You told me just to shut up, so I'm not going to say anything. It's up to you.
Okay. You take care now. Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
We're talking through Skype right now, ladies and gentlemen. So we're broadcasting on YouTube. We're broadcasting on Blog Talk Radio, and we're broadcasting on YouTube Live. So look, we're all over the place. All right. So
yeah, don't worry. I worked as a television journalist a long time ago. so I'm used to the idea of being broadcast.
Okay, here we go. So how do you pronounce your name?
Chandran Nair.
Chandran Nair. Okay.
Yes.
Got it. All right. So I was telling people about very unique. When I looked at the write-up on your life, you have lived a very unique and rich life. And I always try to find people like that who can add to the conversations we're having about what's going on in the world.
Sound.
So,
sorry.
Can you hear me?
Good.
Okay. We're still having some technical difficulties, folks, but we're trying to work it out here. We're trying to bring it to you.
No.
Okay, are you still there?
Sound is not good.
Okay. Well, I can hear you very well.
Try calling again.
Okay, I tell you what. Why don't we just use the phone instead of the video? What? Okay, and that'll probably help with the speed of the feed. Okay, so I'm gonna hang up this call. Yeah, all right, and I'm gonna call you back just with the phone. Just with the phone. Okay, still waiting for the pickup. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so sorry about, the inconvenience here. But as long as we're working with electronics and, machines, we're liable to run into this problem. Okay. All right, I'm going to try again. Calling through IM. You can pick up.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, I can hear you. Is the sound better? Is the sound better now?
Yes, it is better now.
Okay, there we go. So we'll do it this way now. So let's get right into the questions. Tell us your journey. I would like to know your journey from poet to mediator and UNESCO director. How did this? Very improbable. You're Indian and you were born in Singapore,
No, I was not born in Singapore. I was born in India.
You were born in India.
Yeah, I was born in Kerala, southwest India,
Okay.
and I left India at the age of 6 with my mother to join up with my father, who had gone to Singapore in 1947.
Okay.
When India got independent, my father suddenly found himself without a job because he came from an aristocratic family. And so when they became independent, they sort of threw out all the aristos.
Okay.
You see, Nair is actually a title as well.
Nair is what title?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we ended up in Singapore, and I grew up in one of the most difficult parts of Singapore, in a Chinese gangster area, actually.
So you
Singapore.
went from being an aristocrat to.
Sorry?
You went from being part of the aristocracy in India to one of the worst places in Singapore.
But my part of the aristocracy, my family had actually sort of lost their fortunes quite a while back. So, we weren't that rich or anything.
Okay.
My father actually was working as a teacher when he was thrown out of his job. And so I ended up in Singapore working, being educated in a primary school in English. And because Singapore was still a British colony at the time when we went there in 1951. And so I grew up in 3 different environments. My home environment was Indian. My school environment was British. And the general environment of Singapore was Chinese.
Okay. Oh.
So actually, I mean, I grew up in 3 different cultures, if you want to put it that way.
All right.
And when I finished my primary schooling, they have an exam called the 11 plus exam, which selects people for the next stage of secondary schooling. And I ended up in the best school in Singapore, which is called Raffles Institution.
Okay.
And then I went to the University of Singapore, where I did science. And I got a bachelor's in botany and zoology, and then did a master's in marine biology.
Wow, that's amazing.
But I started writing very young. My first poem, I think, I wrote when I was 9 years old. And but my first poem when I was about 17 in the secondary school magazine.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I was reading about that. I was talking about this before you came on the air. That you and I do have something in common. My first poem was published as a result of a school publication, Chicago Public Schools.
Yes.
So yeah, but I stopped writing poetry some time ago.
Yes, he did too. But I mean, I did other things than write poems. I mean, I was the I edited the university newspaper, student newspaper, for a couple of years. And those were very interesting years because, Singapore's political history was when we got our independence from Britain in 1959, but we had a communist insurgency problem. And so these were very difficult years when we were trying to establish a democratic type of government.
Right.
Exactly. And the chap who became the Prime Minister of Singapore was called Lee Kuan Yew, and he started off as a socialist, but he ended up very much less socialistic than a lot of other leaders, But in the meantime, he helped to build Singapore from a harbor sort of establishment we are a little island, you know, and into one of the great cities of the world.
Right. Right. Now, would you say that you living at the crossroads of so many cultures helped you to be a mediator for the UN or UNESCO?
I think it did give me a unique sort of perspective as to what the UN does. I mean, you know, a lot of people don't understand the UN. All they know is what happens with the political people in New York.
Right.
That is not actually what the UN is. The
No.
UN has got 20 other agencies which are working in the field of health and education and culture and communication, which is where I was in UNESCO. It is working in food and agriculture. We are working on women's issues and so on and so forth. So the UN has got a lot more than just sorry if I use a term, the circus in New York. You know?
No, that's fine with me. The livelier the words, the better it is for the program.
I mean, and some of us, I mean, people tell you that the people in the UN are fat cats who don't work. That's absolutely untrue. Those of us who are really concerned and have worked all over the world, how much we have tried. Okay, I mean, in my work in UNESCO, I worked in Asia, I worked in Africa, I worked in Latin America, and I even worked in Eastern Europe when they got their independence from the Soviet Union. And also in the Caribbean. And each time you go to work in a country, you have to adapt to their circumstances, not they to yours. What did you do? I was recruited into the UN. I used to represent Singapore in a number of UN meetings. At one of these meetings, one of the directors of UNESCO from Paris said to me, "Why don't you come and work for us?" And I said no, because at that time I was the equivalent of a vice president in a very large publishing group in Singapore. Right. This was the largest communications group in Singapore. And my wife was working for the Singapore government as a senior civil servant. So even given the UN tax-exempt salary, we were both earning a little bit more than that actually put together. So, you know, it was not really, and the offer was to work in Pakistan, which at that time was considered a hardship posting, you know. Right. But in the end, we accepted, and I went to Karachi, where I was based, in the regional bureau that looked after book development in Asia and the Pacific. And we spent 4.5 years in Karachi, and we still consider it one of the best times of our lives.
Why is that?
Well, first of all, I found that I was doing something very worthwhile, helping countries to set up their publishing and book distribution infrastructure. I mean, this may sound strange to people from the West, who for whom books are, you know, sort of appear out of thin air. You go to a bookshop and you find the book. If you go to schools, you have textbooks either given to you, or you get a list which you take to a bookshop and you get a book. You don't realize how many countries in the world, at least in the early 80s when I was working for UNESCO, don't have a publishing industry and don't have textbooks at primary, secondary, or tertiary or university levels, and for whom providing textbooks was an almost impossible problem. A lot of countries had to depend on their former colonial masters for their textbooks. But of course, the colonial textbooks or textbooks published in the colonial country did not reflect the culture and values that newly independent countries in Africa, in Asia, and elsewhere wanted to reflect.
or even blacks or people of color in America, we've had to depend on how we were reflected by others in our
Yes, I know. In
textbooks.
America, every sort of different region used to have their own textbooks, right?
Yeah.
But basically, you see what UNESCO's education department did. They helped to finance and build the school. They worked out the curriculum that was used for education. They trained the teachers using this curriculum, and people like me then came along from the communications and culture part of UNESCO and helped to set up the mechanism for actually turning the curriculum into textbooks that could be used in schools for education.
Okay.
So,
all right.
so in a sense, but while doing that, I also evolved a series of training programs for publishers in developing countries, and the fruits of that was that we came up with 5 training manuals. Each of these manuals was written by professionals and edited by me, and I taught the 5 courses in over 65 courses in many countries across Africa, Asia, the Caribbean, and even in Latin America. And I validated the courses by teaching them. And one of the countries in which these courses were offered in the mid-80s was in China. And China, in the mid-80s, out of communism, but hadn't quite gone into being a capitalist state. They still are not. But they were interested in capitalism as far as economics went, not in as far as politics went. And my training courses was something that they saw as absolutely necessary in order to bring about a different mentality when it came to publishing and book distribution. And I must say I had a very successful time in China. And one of the major things that perhaps I've done in my time in the UN, I spent 24 years in the UN. And one of the major things was...
Hold on a second, Chandran. I didn't hear. You spent how many years in the UN?
24.
24.
Your wife, 24. Okay. Yeah, 24. All right.
Yeah.
24 years.
One of the major things that I did in China was they had decided that they wanted to drop Russian as their second language in schools. And they had come to the conclusion that perhaps English was a better fit for them, considering what they wanted to do in the future. And the education sector people from UNESCO had worked with the World Bank to get them a loan to do this, to introduce English into the schools, to train the teachers and so on. But then they came up against the problem of textbooks. And so a colleague from the education sector asked me whether I would go to China and discuss this problem with the Chinese.
All right.
And I did. And we had some disagreements as to the size of the textbook and the type and so on. And in the end, I did manage to convince them that they needed to have books that were a certain size and with certain typefaces and so on, against the wishes of the Deputy Minister for Education, actually. So it was quite a political battle to get this thing through. But we did get it through. They produced the books, and the books became an absolute hit in China.
Very good.
And I think I'm not claiming credit here, but I think that the fact that they switched to English made it possible some years down the road for China to become the manufacturing hub of the world.
Yeah.
Because a Chinese student who had gone through secondary education and who had been taught English as a second language was capable of reading the manuals to operate the machines and to follow the instructions that the principals in the US or the UK or wherever else they were wanted for their manufactured products.
Very good. Now, I want to take you from the past to the present. I know you probably keep abreast of the things that are going on in the world. And I want to ask you about what is your take on the humanitarian crisis in Yemen? And as a former mediator, how would you handle the involvement of the U.S. or the Saudis in that whole conflict in Yemen?
Well, actually, when you've been and worked in developing countries, you have a different sort of feel for what happens in a country. Mm-hmm. War is always going to be painful for the people to whom it's happening, right, wherever they are, whoever they are. And the Yemen is a country which in its history has known very little periods of peace. Mm. So the Yemenis are people who are used to this, who are used to war, who are used to suffering. And if you look at the history of Yemen, it's always been one of tribal wars, mm-hmm, wars between petty kingdoms and so on. And actually the history of modern Yemen may be said to have started in 1939 when the British actually took over Aden. Mm-hmm. And because the British needed a point at which they could refuel their ships between London and India. Right. And Yemen was chosen as the point because of the Suez Canal. So if you come down the Suez Canal and they established themselves there, and they sort of drew a dividing line. They had 9 different areas that the British demarcated, and then drew a dividing line to say, this is South Yemen, it belongs to us. That's North Yemen, it belongs to who was the prince who was ruling it at that time. Okay. And so the business of dividing up the Yemen and of was already there a long time before our era. Okay. But I think you can say that everything really started for us and our knowledge of Yemen as a country in 1962 when there was an army coup which finally got rid of the hereditary rulers of North Yemen. Mm-hmm. And then after that, it's been a history of, Saudi Arabia supported the people in South Yemen. Mm-hmm. They have always been friendly and supportive of the South Yemenis. So Saudi Arabia's involvement with Yemen is not recent. It goes back right to the beginning of Yemen, if we really want to talk about it, because Ibn Saud, when the first king of Saudi Arabia, right, was already had family in South Yemen. Mm. I mean, it came as a shock to a lot of people when the Saudis started bombarding, Yemen. But basically, Saudis and Yemenis have always been involved in war. Okay. Talking about the humanitarian part of it, right? I mean, I sometimes am appalled by the hypocrisy of the West. Mm. There's no other way to put it. I mean, I suppose all of us, all human beings, are hypocritical if you really come down to it. But I mean, the people who are now demonstrating against Trump in the streets of Chicago, where were they when the bombs were falling in Iraq? Yes. And hundreds of thousands of Iraqi children, men, women, and children were being killed. Mm-hmm. Where were they when the bombs were falling in Libya? Yeah. And Libya, I worked with the Libyans. Libya was a country that was progressing towards democracy. I mean, you might not have thought it from the way people talk about Gaddafi. Right. But he had given the country, he had brought the country back to its feet. Women were free. Mm-hmm. They didn't have veils. They went to school and universities. They had jobs. Mm-hmm. I mean, and while there was a lot of restriction on what we call political freedom, and believe me, I come from Singapore, which the US holds as a paragon these days. But Singapore, when I was growing up, you were very careful what you said because the special branch, which was the secret police almost, could take you in on anything. Courage to be like me, the editor of the student newspaper, and to have dissenting views.
Right. And Gaddafi, before his overthrow, before he was overthrown and subsequently killed, he was doing some work to bring a lot of the African countries together at that time as well, too.
Talking about Gaddafi.
Yeah, I know. I mean, there are countries where it happened. It didn't happen in Singapore. We just
Don't talk about Singapore.
we just jail people for 27 years. I mean, no, but the thing is that yes, there were things that were happening against individuals, but as a society, it was progressive.
Why you talk about Yemen?
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly.
And I think Iraq was, I don't know Iraq at all because I have not had dealings with them, but I think in a sense it was more or less the same as what you found in Libya.
Right.
It was not perfect. There was suppression and repression, but in the main, the population had food, homes, had transportation, had work, and there was it was not an Islamic society which forbade women to do anything. Women were free.
Yeah.
I mean,
it wasn't a theocracy. Yeah.
No.
But at the same time, if you want to hold up democracy and say this is democracy, A to Z, and if it doesn't fit, and there's things that are happening that are not on our script, then you're not democratic. Yes, you can say that.
Yeah. I've always had
Africa.
Yeah, being a person, being Black in America, I've seen how democracy has been used as a catch-all phrase to cover a lot of the indiscretions and transgressions of a nation. But we're a democratic society, and they use that as some sort of veil sometimes. Well, I've looked at other countries who weren't quote unquote democratic and have liked what they did a whole lot better in many cases.
Yes, but the thing is that comparing one country to another is sometimes very difficult and probably productive. But at the same time, I really do wish that all the people who feel so badly about certain things now in the West could have invested a little bit of time asking, why are we going and bombing these people?
Yes. Yeah.
Why are we destroying their infrastructures?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the television pictures coming out of Aleppo or somewhere else, you'll see these are nice big concrete buildings.
Right.
In which people used to live.
Right.
Where they got water, where they got electricity, and so on and so forth. And today they have nothing. Everything has been destroyed.
Yes.
So where is your democracy then?
Yes, exactly. I've been talking about this for the past, since Bush was in office, about the things that we've done in our foreign policy. And I've asked the same questions you're asking right now. Where were you for the past 8 or 16 years? Yeah.
Yeah. So that question about, the humanitarian crisis, I mean, the humanitarian crisis is always happening to somebody else.
Yeah.
And I think it doesn't help very much to just ask after the fact, I think it's when we decide we are going to do something, is the people in the State Department and in the Foreign Office in the UK and in France and in all the other countries.
Right.
They provide the bombs and the planes to bomb these people and to destroy their whole livelihood and their cultures. We should be talking asking the question before they went to bomb.
Exactly.
What will happen? What is
Exactly.
the humanitarian cost of this?
Right. Right. We tend to think backwards, don't we? We ask the questions later. We bomb first and ask questions later.
Yes, exactly. So when we talk about humanitarian cost of Iraq, of Libya, of Syria, and now Yemen, I mean, what is the political outcome that we want that makes it necessary to inflict this amount of suffering on people?
Well, in our country,
and don't tell me
yeah.
it's that we are going to bring democracy to them. Where is the democracy in Libya? Where's the democracy in Iraq?
Exactly. Or they're clinging to a little bit of democracy in Syria, but they tried to bomb that democracy out of existence.
Yep.
Getting to that, to the next question I'd like to ask you, there's been a recent ban by President Trump on refugees from several countries. All but 2 of the 7 countries haven't been bombed by the U.S., and that would be the Sudan and Iran. America has even armed and aided terrorists in some of those countries as well. What are your insights? You gave us a little bit about. What are your insights about on that dilemma? Us in the West here, arming terrorists and arming ISIS and arming Al Qaeda. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, actually, I mean, the question of immigration is one which every country is to have a policy on.
Right.
I mean, I'm an immigrant myself. I know what it means to arrive in a country that you don't have any links with, and having to make yourself part of that country, and to become a national of that country. Mm-hmm. It's not easy, and you have to learn a new language, you have to learn new cultures, you have to adjust, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, if countries don't take people from other places, it's not going to work either. I mean, every country needs to be open to immigration, but open to immigration under its own rules and its own needs. I don't think it can be an open door policy, and no country will have an open door immigration policy.
My question was probably more to how do you bomb countries? And that's what we've done in the U.S. How do you bomb these countries and then say...
The problem, I think, is not that it's just barring countries. Mm-hmm. There is a real problem today with refugees from the Middle East, caused by all the bombing, caused by all these wars.
Right.
And nobody wants to, in power, wants to acknowledge that they have a responsibility for the flow of unchecked flow of immigration and refugees and immigrants today. Europe is being submerged by these refugees.
Right.
The US is perhaps not being submerged to the same extent.
No, we're not.
But it is also true that all these wars, all this bombing has also given rise to a very pernicious form of militantism.
Of what now?
And of Islamic militants,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The Islamic State and all the other groups. Jihadis. We saw it first in Pakistan in the mid-80s.
Right.
When the US and the CIA supported the Mujahideen and trained them and gave them arms to fight the Russians.
Exactly.
Because the Russians were allied with the then ruling people in Afghanistan. And the same people that were trained and given the arms, when the Russians were pushed out of Afghanistan, became Al-Qaeda.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly the same people.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's Al-Qaeda first. And then they turned their arms on the people who had trained them.
Yes. Yeah.
And so the Americans got pulled into the war in Vietnam. In Afghanistan, sorry, my first war that I actually got very involved in was the Vietnam War.
Right.
They got involved with the war in Afghanistan and found that the very same people they had trained were now against them.
It's the same story over again.
And that led to the formation of the Taliban, and we still have that situation in Afghanistan.
Yes, exactly.
And so, you know, I
Trump's thing.
and so I think we have to really understand where some of these things are coming from. So we now have millions of refugees streaming out of Libya, out of Iraq, out of Syria, and now or out of Yemen. And a lot of these people are innocent people and children. Some of them are not so innocent. Some of them are actually coming to start Islamic revolutions and trouble in Europe and perhaps in America as well. So what do? Do you have an open door policy and let everybody in? Or do you say we need a vetting system which will help us to weed out as far as possible those who could be harmful to us?
Yeah. Well, in America, in the U.S., we already had what I would consider one of the most stringent refugee vetting systems in the world. I mean, the average wait list for people to actually, you know, be considered to even get a green card is like years. So we had a system in place. We had a system in place as is.
Grandchildren in America, we have grandchildren in America, and we build in immigration. So yes, I'm aware of it.
Yeah, I mean it's extremely stringent here. Yeah.
But the thing is, if you want to talk about the executive order signed by Trump recently, President Trump, the fact is that he is not doing anything that Obama didn't do.
Exactly.
Or that Bush didn't do.
Exactly.
They too had temporary orders when the situation warranted it to make sure that Americans were protected.
Yeah.
So in a sense, and I have read the order fully,
right?
Because I found it online, and it doesn't say Muslim anywhere, and it is temporary, and it's supposed to be reviewed in 90 days.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. In that order, and this is what I think a lot of people are talking about when it comes to it, was the draft of the order, which did mention those countries. And you're right that he's not doing anything different than what Obama did. And I've talked about that. I've talked about the fact that basically he's going off the same playbook that Obama used. He's going off the same playbook that Bush used. So as you say, this isn't new. My essential problem has always been in this country is that you're 7 times more likely to be killed by a right-wing white extremist in this country than you are any Muslim extremist. And we haven't addressed that problem in our own country. I think that's my issue, is that when you can talk, as you said, we can talk about, you know, what happened here and what he did here. But when Obama became president, there was a report that came out that talked about right-wing extremism being on the rise and white nationalist groups being on the rise in this country. And as you said, just in Ontario, Canada, we see a mosque being shot up. Years and years and years of this has been taking place, and we haven't addressed that in our own country. As I said, you are 7 times more likely in America to be killed by a right-wing extremist than you are a Muslim extremist in this country.
But you know, the fact is that the executive order as it stands and what I've read from it, I don't see how it can be treated as an anti-Muslim thing. I mean, it's basically not. It's aimed at certain countries where there are problems, where there is a risk people who might be damaging to America. And I think any government would be remiss if they didn't take that into account.
I totally agree. Your position as president gives you the responsibility to make sure that people are safe in your country. I think, and this is where the disconnect is, I think, when people just merely talk about the executive order itself. If you looked at the press conference itself and some of the allusions that he's made, when you look at some of the things that he said on the campaign trail as well, too, I think what some people are doing, and I can't afford to do this, they're divorcing the executive order from the rhetoric that we've heard from him time and time again. And you can't do that either. You can't do that either. The executive order wasn't spawned just out of a desire to protect Americans. It's also connected to the press conference that he held and things he said there, and some of the rhetoric that he's been spewing since he's been on the campaign trail from that long back.
Well, I don't think that. I don't think that anybody would for Trump for being politically correct.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't call that political correctness. I would just call that leaving people with their dignity. I do believe we can get too caught up in political correctness, but I also believe that things that we call political correctness sometimes is just treating other human beings with dignity.
Yes.
You know,
but I mean, as far as this thing about the immigration ban is concerned, that's my point of view.
Right,
that
exactly.
The government has to protect the people, and if they think this is the way to protect the people, then and it doesn't have any obvious statements that could be construed as being anti any.
Right. I think that, and this is where I agree with you. I think that people are so predisposed to disagreeing with Trump that they attribute certain things to what he's saying that you can't find in that executive order. You can't find it in the executive. It's not there. So and this is my problem with a lot of people who are just out of hand rejecting everything he says. You have to really look at the bills. You have to look at the executive orders to figure out what's being said and what's being done. And sometimes we reject everything someone says because, we have a personal dislike for him. Some people did the exact same thing to President Obama, too. They just rejected what he said out of hand without listening to what he was saying completely. And I think that people are too prone to do that, period. If you're a Republican, you do that with the Democrats. If you're a Democrat, you do that with the Republicans. So we see this across the board in this country.
But my point.
You're being chopped off, Edward. We can't hear you. Now, start again.
Oh, did I go in and out there?
Your voice was being chopped off, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Now start again, talk again. Start again.
No, it's not a big problem. Thank you.
Okay, anyway, the point I wanted to make was
go right ahead.
That on paper, the executive order does not seem to be in any way politically incorrect.
Exactly. And on that we agree.
What they associated with, what all those people who are demonstrating and picketing the airports and so on are associating with is perhaps what the man is or what he said during his campaign.
Right.
But at the same time, they are doing this in order to protest the fact that you are blocking people who are hurting and they are not. Then they were hurting when the bombs were, because all these people were not on the streets protesting when the bombs were falling, were they?
Not at all. They were not there. I was watching. I live here, so I know they weren't doing it. I know they weren't doing it. And these are the very points I bring up time and time again to the dislike of many. But I bring up the point that where were you for the past 8 years, or where were you, the past 16 years? This stuff has been going on for quite some time, and I've been writing about it for quite some time. Other people have been writing about it for quite some time. So on that point, we wholeheartedly agree. Now, we're coming down to the close here. You
Yes.
have become renowned for your poetry, and you have. Don't be modest. You become very famous for your poetry.
Yes.
What?
Yes, he had.
What?
You have a
What do
proud
you
wife.
mean?
What?
Yes.
What?
What?
Very famous for your poetry.
Oh, no.
What has that? What has that done for you? I mean, in other words, how has that gift of your poetry spoken to you in a time where I believe the arts are often neglected as a whole? I mean, the power of poetry and the power
I,
of the
uh,
arts to
I,
transform a society. How has that? How has that been for you?
well, I'll share an anecdote with you. When
Okay,
I
go ahead.
first started writing, my father, who actually is a writer himself,
Okay.
was a writer himself in my own language, and who eventually ended up with 10 novels to his name.
Oh, really?
He looked
Wow.
at me and said, "You don't want to start writing. You don't know how much of hurt that's going to bring you."
Oh my goodness, yeah.
And I have actually found that poetry is a very hard mistress,
Yes, yes,
because it's not possible, if you're a poet, to lie to yourself
right.
in a poem.
Yeah,
And
there's a
so
level of
for long
honesty.
stretches of my life,
Yeah.
I have not written a word.
Mm, mm,
And so I have less books than might have been possible.
right.
But I suppose that I can say that every poem in those three books
Hmm.
actually were truthful and felt. My poems are fairly intensely personal,
Hmm.
but I have also tried to make them as universal as possible.
Right.
And in a sense, I think I have succeeded in doing that.
Well, you made a big
But poetry
impact on.
has been a place of solace for me
Hmm.
ever since I first started reading.
Mm,
And though I don't read much anymore,
hmm.
it gives me you know a unifying feeling of connection in space and time with the poets that I really love.
Mm. I don't know if I've heard it explained that beautifully before. Thank you so much for being my guest today. I really appreciated
Well,
talking to you.
it was lovely to be your guest, and thank you for
Yeah.
inviting.
Do we get to see your podcast,
Yes,
Dr. James?
I will be putting up the broadcast, all right?
Is it on YouTube?
It'll be on YouTube and Blog Talk Radio. I'll post you. I'll tag you in the post, okay?
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well,
I'll
thank
be
you.
like that.
Nice.
Good afternoon to you.
Good
Nice
afternoon
talking
to
to
you.
you.
Well, it's night there, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's night for us. Not that late, but it's
Yeah,
night.
well, good evening to you.
Yeah. Was
Bye bye.
thanks a lot then.
Yeah,
Goodbye.
thank you for your time. You take care now, all right?
Bye
Yes.
bye.
Bye.
Well, that was Chandran Nair, author, poet, and former mediator and director of UNESCO. In case you don't know what UNESCO is, it is the United Nations Education, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. Um, and if you haven't had a chance, I mean, I would type in his name, and I would, you know, look at some of the poems that have been translated into English. And some of he's already written in English. And I found what he said to be true. If you're going to be a writer, like his father said, it's going to be a hard business. And people who live with me know how it weighs on you sometimes when you write. You carry it around with you. It is a hard mistress. It is a hard taskmaster at times. But when you see that it's produced what uh, Chandran Nair's work has produced, um, you know, through some of our pain, some people find their purpose, and so do we. That does it for Rhymes Reasons. Now is the end of the show, and Thelma Rhymes' grandbaby boy has got to go. God bless, take care, and be safe.